And then go Facebook Live.
All right.
I'm glad you at least heard the last one.
20 seconds. Once you're live, I'll give you the sound and we'll just go from there.
Okay. Come on.
Here we go.
Welcome to Sacred Exploration with Lisa Tremont Oda. Are you making the most of your experience as a spiritual being in physical form? Do you want to live with greater levels of peace and integrity? Today, Lisa and her guests will help you discover, uncover, and recover what's missing in yourself. Now, here's your host, Lisa Tremont Oda.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Exploration. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Oda. And today we're going to have a very scintillating and deep discussion about flirting. It's a new time. It's a new age. And flirting really can be considered a sacred activity. But I must say that with the advent of the much needed Metoo movement, what was once just rather lighthearted and fun has, in my opinion, whether you're on the receiving end of flirting or on the delivering end, the best word I can think of is awkward. It's a little bit awkward these days. So I have invited as my guest today one of my heroes, one of my mentors, Francesca Gentille. Francesca, for over 25 years, has been a world-traveled radical researcher of life, a pirate sailing the high seas of new paradigms. She's a clinical sexologist, an initiated shaman in 4 traditions, and shaman of the Cougar Luscious, co-author of The Marriage of Sex and Spirit, as well as the radio show host of Sex, Tantra, and Kuma Sutra. So you can see how appropriate she is to be with us today. Besides these evocative expressions, she offers Courtesan Queen workshops, the Sacred Courtesan School, and Cougar Luscious Aging workshops. She has been the keynote speaker of the National Cougar Convention and the National Flirting Convention. Again, no mistake about why she's with us today. She has been interviewing television luminaries such as Tom Hanks and Leonard Nimoy, and has taught Tantra and Sacred Eros workshops at the American Association of Sex Educators and Therapists. So with that, before we jump right in and welcome Francesca onto the show, let me just go ahead and welcome Francesca onto the show. Welcome, Francesca. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm delighted to be here, and with such a fun topic, but also a dangerous topic, and one that is, as you highlighted, I think very needed.
Very much needed. It's a hot topic, we could say, and but with the serious element of it, as I have begun to do, I am going to go ahead and light the candle for our show, and I'd like us just to take a moment, and for those of you who are listening, just to take some deep breaths so that we can really honor the discussion today and really feel the compassion for all of those who have been abused without consent, who have suffered at the hands of social norms that have not been clear, and that we have not had the skills to protect ourselves in all occasions. And so for the many women and men who have been abused and who have come out through the Me Too movement, but also the countless others who remain in silence. And may healing occur for all, and may we together engage and explore this topic so that we can prevent such pain and suffering in the future as we move forward. Yeah. Well, so as we said, I mean, it's a very serious topic these days, and a confusing one, a very confusing one. I feel like, um, as one of our listeners had written in, and by the way, anyone can go ahead and on Sacred Exploration Radio on Facebook, you can go there to watch us live and submit any questions that you might have or comments that you have on the topic. But one woman said too that even common courtesy nowadays is being sort of seen as being flirtatious. And then when flirtation comes along, it's a little hard to even know what to do with it anymore. So Francesca, with all your experience in flirting and even, before thousands of people talking about how to flirt, have you noticed that the vibe has changed around it?
Oh, there's a lot in all of that. And a lot is, I think, just to, as the saying goes, tease it out and distinguish it in a various ways. One of the challenges with flirting in any era is that we can often collapse enticing and seducing and think of that as flirting. And one definition of flirting is attention without intention. So let's just kind of try that on. Flirting could be attention without intention. That it is a lovely exchange of honoring and appreciation of one another, where seduction and enticement are much more goal-oriented. There, I want to get to something soon, now. I want to, regardless of gender, I want to have sex with you today, tonight. It's very goal-oriented. Another agenda item for some people is I want to get you to pay for dinner or to buy me a drink. And that's very immediate and very goal-oriented. I want you to, give me a ride home. I want you to give me, even give me your number, but that gets a little lighter. But some of these other agenda items have a time limit on them, and it starts to get kind of a heaviness or a pointedness. And we put those kind of agendas under seducing and enticing.
Because initially it is that, like you said, words of appreciation, perhaps like, oh, you look lovely tonight, or oh, you have the most beautiful eyes, or whatever it is. And then what comes next?
Well, it's not just what is said. It is definitely why I brought up the intention. Energy follows intention. Energy follows intention. That's, we're here on Sacred Exploration. Energy follows intention. So I could say, you have very nice eyes. Or I could say, you have very nice eyes.
And even for those, yeah.
And it's not the actual words that I'm saying. It's the tone. It's even the energy, like the leaning in. It's a lot of things that can shift the words, and people can be confused because they're not tracking the different levels. So they might say, well, why is this person, quote unquote, successful? Meaning either they're getting what they want, or they're not getting slapped, or they're not getting, people upset with them. Why are they being effective or successful and I'm not? And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, I have that question. Why are some people effective or successful and I'm not? We want to start looking at these other levels. What is the intention that we're carrying as we're saying these things? Are we leaning in? Leaning in is automatically going to be seen as more threatening. Are we, another mistake that people often make is staying too long. So I believe in the drive-by compliment, which is, wow, Lisa, you have beautiful eyes, and then walk away. Walk away, because then there's space for you. There's space for you to think about it. If you are intrigued by what I said, if you were intrigued by me, you can come find me at the party later. You can come find me at the bar later. And then I've given you space to feel comfortable in your own authority and your own agency. It's a really common mistake that people make is, hey, Lisa, you have really beautiful eyes. So who are you here with tonight? So do you have any other friends? Do you like the music? And then pretty soon you're starting to feel trapped, that how do you get out of this interchange? And you don't even have an opportunity to, check into yourself to assess whether or not you find me interesting, whether or not there is some sort of attraction. So for those that are listening, one of the things that, sailing the high seas of flirting and dating in the Metoo era is, especially flirting, is think of flirting as planting a little seed, watering it a bit, but walking away. You don't want to pour, a whole container of water on a new seed.
That's hardly flirting anymore.
That's going to drown the seed.
Right.
The seed's going to die. So, we want to, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking context is huge. Like if you're in a bar or you're in a club or you're at a flirting convention or, some sort of meeting through Meetup or like a dating site. Well, then you're kind of going into it with the idea that people flirt here, people are looking for something here to an extent, not so much true with a bar scene or a club necessarily, but it seems like context would also provide information.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the drive-by compliment, spoken, lightly without a heavy intention, that the drive-by compliment can even happen at work. There's statistics that say that I can't remember the statistics right now, but it's fairly high, the number of people that meet their partner at work. Now, there's a lot who meet it on swiping a dating app these days, but quite a few people will meet each other because they share some common interest or some common place, which could be church, which could be work, which could be the bus stop, which could be the subway station, which could be volunteering. So if we say I can only flirt with someone, once again, separate out seduction and enticement. Mm-hmm. Yes, those are, I would recommend seducing and enticing people only that you have consent to seduce and entice. Well, what is consent? Consent is, I actually recommend keeping your best skills in seduction and enticement for when you're already in a relationship, to keep the relationship alive. And don't use this kind of heavy-handed, hey baby, hey sexy, hey how about it, hey dick pic, hey whatever. Don't use that in the beginning of trying to get someone's attention. Just don't. And but on the other hand, I really want to say that you can use this more light, gee, you look really lovely in that, and walk away. You can use that at work. You can use that at church. You can use that at the bus stop if you go and walk away and go look at something on, the billboard over there. You can do this as long as you give someone space and let them come to you after that. And if they don't come to you, they don't come to you.
Well, I would imagine that's always the way it kind of would work best, kind of the slow drip, the real flirtatious thing. But a lot of times that doesn't happen because it does go into, as you say, the intention of seduction, sometimes rather quickly. But now I think people are simply more conscious of the fact that their words have an implication, and that they're kind of holding, the thing, like you say, like, hey baby, or the way they present things. I think people are starting to tone it down a bit out of fear to a certain extent. I think trying to learn how to do it again, like from, baby steps.
I think more of them could still tone it down personally. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm on dating sites and because currently I'm single, so I'm on dating sites, and more often than I feel comfortable, someone's best guess on how to reach out to me is, hey baby, hey darling, hey doll, you're pretty, you're sexy. And that is not the best way to make a first connection. Now, let's talk a little bit about what would be a good way to make a first connection. Because I think people don't know. They don't know. They're not trying to irritate, women. They just don't know, or to irritate people. And, even on some of the, the Tinders, the this, the that, the Bumbles, it's just lunch, there's a little bit of a profile. People write something. I recommend reading people's profiles and making some. It's so cool that you like extreme sports. It's so great that you like volunteering. It's really, you said that you like dance. What kind of music do you like?
Yes.
To actually comment on something you've read.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to assume that you wouldn't be texting her if you didn't think she was attractive, or you wouldn't be texting him, them, zir. You wouldn't be texting that person if you didn't find them attractive. Okay, that's a given. So now comment on something else that you may feel you have some connection with.
And ask questions about something that they've said. I mean, people love to be asked about themselves and inquired about, right? So if you can't even think of what to say, you could just say, oh, you said that you were interested in water sports. How did that come about? How long have you been interested in water sports?
Be careful of that one. That's actually, that's a BDSM cue, by the way. But
is it really?
It is.
Sports?
Water sports.
Oh, I did not know that.
But at any rate, one of the things that one of my teachers says is many people think that they're interesting, but there are very few people that actually are interested. So you pointed to something brilliant, is if you show up as someone who is interested,
mm-hmm.
really, in another human being, that's going to make you so precious.
Mm-hmm. And you too reminded me that I wanted to mention that while mostly it's women who in the Metoo movement have come forth, it doesn't matter what our sexual orientation is, whether it is lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, transgender, whatever it is, these issues are up for all of us, because it's just really the human condition.
They are up for all of us. And I have a 25-year-old son, and he has definitely shared stories with me where his boundaries were crossed, and that wasn't okay. And we can talk more about some of this later. Is a little bit longer story, because I get a countdown as well as Lisa that we're getting a little bit close to break. So I'm tracking before going into a really depthful and juicy story. But yes, this transcends gender. It transcends sexual identity, sexual preference, sexual, it's an issue in humanity. Do we really understand consent? So I think when we talk about flirting and seducing and enticing and touch, we need to keep clarifying consent. It's a nice concept. I think we understand the word consent, permission, two people are aligned. I don't think we understand how to get there in an effective way. I think we're worried that it'll be too clunky, or that in trying to achieve consent will actually disconnect from one another and an opportunity for more.
Wonderful. Well, we will come back to that conversation after our break. If you're following us on Facebook Live, Sacred Exploration Radio, we'll continue the conversation there. Otherwise, just hang with us. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Ota, and you're listening to Sacred Exploration. All right. Well, Facebook friends, let's see if we have any particular comments. I did want to share with everybody my book, because again, I really want to bring forth the imperfectly vegan message into our conversations here with Sacred Exploration. And the reason being that, it's kind of like food first. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to take care of others or the planet. It's really one cyclical relationship. And to be honest, it came upon me earlier today that when we think about today's discussion and consent, especially on the topic of consent, what's happening in the animal world is that when we slaughter animals, we are slaughtering them without their consent. And so as Francesca and I were talking about, it doesn't matter what your sexual or how you identify yourself or what your sexual orientation is. It's the fact that we're all human, that we all deserve respect, and we all deserve to have our boundaries respected. I feel the same is true for animals, right? I mean, animals, they don't have a voice the way we do. And even as humans, like even when we have a voice, it's obviously hard to say you're crossing my boundaries. That's why we've had so many issues over the decades, right? But animals don't even have that opportunity to defend themselves. So I just think that is an interesting exploration, that those of us who are really feeling something around the Me Too movement might take some time to extend that into the treatment of animals and feel into what that's about. I don't know. What do you think about that, Francesca?
Here we go.
Oh, we're already going back. We'll come back to that at the next commercial.
You are listening to Sacred Exploration. To reach Lisa or her guest today, please call into 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to sacredexploration@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Sacred Exploration. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Ota, and I am so happy to be speaking with Francesca Gentille. We are speaking about flirting, the future of flirting, especially in light of the Me Too movement. And before break, we were just about to we were touching upon the issue of consent, and you were also going to share with us a story. And now we have time.
Woohoo! Yeah, so when we think of consent, we sometimes make a mistake to think that only one gender needs consent. Like, we have to make sure that women are consenting. And we forget that one of the wounds of the culture around the masculine is assuming that, like, a real man would always want to have sex. A real man would always want to see a woman naked. And there is no always. There is no, I'm not always in the mood for pizza, even though I love pizza. I'm not always in the mood for music, even though I love music. Human beings are not always anything. And regardless of if we're heteronormative or not, we're not always going to be in the mood for sex, regardless of our gender. And so my son had gone to a game night with some friends. He was expecting that he's going to game, and it was going to be a tabletop game, and he's walked into some friend's apartment, and there's a bedroom off to the right, and there's a living room in front, and a little kitchen tucked away. And, he's really looking forward to this. He's a big gamer. And he notices, just kind of in passing as he's coming in, that there's also one of those stripper poles that's been attached to the ceiling in the living room. And everybody comes in, and they're like, oh, let's sit down and chit chat for a while on the couch. And the couch is right, facing this pole. And it's like suddenly the two girls, there were two couples and Dylan, the two girls like strip off. Like they start taking off their clothes. One strips down, I think, to a bra and panty. One strips down just to like this little G-string. And they start gyrating on the stripper pole. And I said, how was that for you, Dylan? And he said that he felt frozen. He said that he felt that part of his spirit or his energy was kind of up in the corner of the room, kind of had fled to the corner of the room and was watching it from a distance. And I said, that's a sign of trauma. Mm-hmm. That's a sign of disassociation.
Right.
And so that was across your boundaries, and they didn't ask you. I'm guessing they didn't ask you. There was no request if that was going to be okay for you, and you didn't have a chance to say anything. And he said, yeah. And what happened then? He said after that, they decided it was time to go to sleep. The couple went into the bedroom that owned the apartment. The other couple went on a blow-up mattress. And the girl in the couple kept saying, oh, why don't you come here? And the blow up mattress is going to be so much more comfortable, and you don't need to sleep on that, cold couch by yourself. And I said, how was that for you? And he said, uncomfortable. I said, what did you choose to do? He said, I chose to stay on the couch. And I've had that experience. I've had that experience where I think I'm just going to something else. I think I'm going to a party. I think I'm going to dinner. I think I'm going to, visit friends. And really suddenly people are taking off clothes, or suddenly people are saying, oh, you don't want to sleep on the couch. That's so lonely. You want to come in and sleep in our comfy bed. And I remember being at someone's house where like every hour they would come and say it again. Like, oh, you don't want to be sleeping here in the living room. And once again, outside of gender,
Right.
it's not okay. It's not okay to keep repeating. If you're repeating yourself over and over and over, and someone has said, no, thank you. No, not really. No, I'm not in the mood. The person is trying to be gracious to you by saying it in maybe a gentler way.
Right. Well, maybe this is part of the benefit to the Me Too movement is this greater sensitivity to not make assumptions, or to think that, to assume that people are going to want what you have to offer. I mean, the other night, I took myself out for a drink. I was minding my own business, and I had one of the most, I almost thought, well, it must be because we're going to be doing this show today. The universe is giving me some material. But I ended up having to have someone at the hotel walk me to my car, because this man was probably doing everything possible wrong. And it was like somewhat traumatizing. And so much assumption was being made. And I really like using the word request. And like, even if people could just remember, and from a public health standpoint, which is part of my background, we want to use that participation theory if we want our programs to be successful. So if you're actually interested in someone, you're going to have more success if you make a request and you include the recipient in the decision-making process, as opposed to making any sort of assumptions.
And then it's, one of the things about strength and true power and strength, which, by the way, I've spent my life working on, that I wasn't always capable of hearing no. So I'm just going to raise my hand. Have I had such a wounded sense of self, such a wounded sense of self-worth, that it was extremely hard for me to hear no, that I would feel very rejected, that I might feel angry, that I might feel depressed or sad if I heard a no. I've actually gone to therapy, gone to workshops, spent years and years developing an inner sense of well-being, so that if I say, I really like you, I would love to have dinner, and someone says no, I can take that breath and say thank you and walk away. Mm-hmm. I don't have to say, oh, come on. Oh, don't you want to? Oh, come on. Don't you really? And once again, getting back to the lightness versus the heaviness or the pointedness, it really is okay to gracefully say, I'd like to date you. I've had people say gracefully, I like you, Francesca, I'd like to date you. Mm-hmm. And if I say, I'll keep that in mind, or I'll keep that in mind is a gentle way of at least saying not now. It's definitely not a yes.
Right.
It sounds like this.
Hear that.
Yes. You want to date me? When? That would be a yes. We're looking for enthusiastic yeses. If I say, oh, I'll keep that in mind, or no, not right now, that means drop it. And I've had men that had the graciousness to just ask. I say, not now, not yet. That's not right for me, or whatever at this moment. And in some cases, I have gone back to them, sometimes years later, and said, X number of years ago when you said you found me attractive and you were interested in dating, would you still be? I've actually done that. And, so it's like I'm taking it and filing it away. Mm-hmm. So the way you ask is so important. Right. And if you start to pressure someone, if you had pressured me after that, you would have gone in my garbage heap in my mind. You wouldn't have gone to my inner document where I list potential men that I might want to date in the future. You would have gone into the delete file. So I really encourage that ability that resiliency to be able to hear a no.
Along the lines of your story that you told about your son and the dance pool and all that assumption, I think about, because I have two young boys myself, 21 years old and 18 years old. And so it's got me thinking about these college kids. And, you turn 18 and you're a legal adult and you could be penalized as an adult. And so I have heard that kind of one of the new things is that young college students, men, are being told that if they're going to have sex with somebody, that they should get that person to sign a consent beforehand. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it strips away the romance but I can also see the point, because especially in college when people are drinking, I mean, when alcohol gets involved, and that was the problem the other night.
I just want to say something is that the romance has been stripped away a long time ago. It's if we want romance, and this is for those of you who want romance, by the way, in the blessing and consent culture means ask for it. So if I want, I'm single, I'm dating, let's say I like romance, and I can ask for it, but I also need to make it distinct. So romance means to me that I would like to receive flowers. Romance means to me that I would like you to take me out to dinner or cook dinner. Romance means to me that we're going to have several dates before we have sex, really building a sense of emotional connection and anticipation. That's what romance means to me. And I am looking for that. I am looking for that in people that I'm dating. So guess what? I'm empowered. Yay! I'm empowered to say that to people. So, for those of you who like romance, once again, outside of gender, feel free to let people know I like romance, and then don't assume.
Explore the 5 love languages together.
Right. Don't assume that anyone knows what romance means anymore, because after the 1960s and the feminist movement and the pill, after that time period, free love, no one knows what romance means anymore. There's not a clear definition of the courtship process. Don't assume that there is. Let people know what you want, because I hear a lot of women complain, and some, non-binary and men complain too, that they're not getting romance. Now, on the other hand, if there's nothing wrong with clarity, there is nothing wrong with clarity. If someone says to me, Francesca, I find you really sexy, and if you're ever available, I would love to make love to you. As long as they can say that and then walk away and not be pressury, if they can just say it like, hey, this is a thing, without attachment, then that lets me look and say, is this someone that I'd like to make love to or not? There's nothing wrong with a graceful expression of interest, whether that's interest like I'd like to date you interest, or if that's interest like I'd like to have sexy fun times with you interest. It's fine to just say it as long as we're not pressuring. And let's look at consent on 2 levels too, by the way. There's verbal consent and nonverbal consent. Especially both of these benefit without drugs and alcohol. Like, oh no, yes. I live in San Francisco. Let me tell you, we are the cutting edge of, drugs and alcohol, all the refined beers and wines and all of the, designer cannabis, etc.
Mixology.
We've got it all here. However, I will tell you that if you want to make sure that you're in an alignment and integrity with your own wants, needs, limits, and boundaries, let alone another person, leave the drugs and alcohol out of it until you're already lovers. Like once you're lovers, hey, why not explore some fun sensations in some way that expand how you're playing with each other? But before you're lovers, there's a pacing that human beings have, especially into that first encounter or those first couple of encounters. Not to say that no means no, people, even if you're married, even if you're
Right.
already in a sexual relationship, and even in the middle of sex, no means no. So if we're having sex and one of us is like, wow, I'm not into it, no means no, even if we're in the middle of what we started. And no shame, no blame. Thank you for telling me. I really appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you for staying emotionally connected with me enough to tell me no. And this is the win, is when we can say thank you for staying emotionally connected with me enough to tell me no, that means that that person is more likely to want to have sex with me in the future. If I shame them, blame them, even, a female to male, like, well, what do you mean you don't want to have sex with me? Like, don't real men want to have sex? Like, if I make him wrong, if he makes me wrong, the chances of our wanting to have sex with each other go way down. And the chance of enjoying our sex together go way down, because now we've broken an emotional connection. But so what do we do around the verbal versus nonverbal? Verbal is, hey, Lisa, would you like to have sex with me? And then you say either yes, no, maybe later, or this is what I would want in order to have sex with you. Nonverbal is, we're talking to each other, and let's say I notice that you're leaning into me and I lean into you, you don't lean back. I lean into you and you also lean in. I maybe make a point like, oh, Lisa, I love that scarf. And I, maybe I just pick up the scarf for a moment and drop it. I don't do anything too, sexy, but I pick up the scarf for a moment and drop it. And then maybe you just stroke my shoulder and go, oh, this fabric is so soft. So we're mirroring each other.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing, I start very little, something that's not going to cross, boundaries. So if you are pulling back, if I reach for your scarf and you pull back, if I've, touched your scarf and then you've stepped a step back, you are now telling me no. You are telling me back off. Mm-hmm. You are telling me slow down. If I touch your scarf and say, ooh, this is so pretty, and then you stroke my arm and say, I love this fabric, and I lean in and say, oh, what scent are you wearing? That's really yummy. And then you lean in and whisper in my ear, now we're saying to each other, yes, yes, like we're interested in what we're creating here.
Mm-hmm.
So we can also look for that nonverbal, but we have to keep tracking it, because we might be getting a yes, I whisper in your ear, you stroke my arm, we're getting a yes, but then maybe I say or do something that upsets you, maybe,
right.
And then you pull back. Well, then I need to pull back. I need to be able to track with you. And if I'm on drugs or alcohol, I'm not going to be able to do that. I won't have the awareness. I won't have the sensitivity to notice the nonverbal cues. And some of you may or may not know who you are on the autism scale, on the neurotypical scale, the Asperger scale. A lot of our techies don't track this stuff very carefully. It's not because you don't want to. Your brain pattern doesn't allow it.
Interesting. Okay, well, on that note, it's time for another commercial break. We're speaking with my guest, Francesca Gentille, about flirting and the future of flirting. So stick with us. We'll be on Facebook Live and right back here on Voice America. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Ota. This is Sacred Exploration. Okay. Well, coming back to our Facebook commercial time, Francesca, I was talking about consent and how animals can't give consent to what's happening to them, and just bringing in the imperfectly vegan context. Is there anything that you'd like to share? It doesn't have to be about that exactly, but just sharing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to share after learning about imperfectly vegan is I love that there's this sense of going towards something and understanding that we're not always going to be perfect. And so if I want to go towards more organic, if I want to go towards more, you know, plants and nuts and things like that, you know, and stay away from the meat industry, which can be so problematic, or try to go towards meats that are more free range, that are more treated in a more humane manner, you know, that I might make mistakes, but just even having that intention. And, you know, I think is so important, is to have a place that we're heading towards.
Right.
And to understand that we're not always going to be perfect. And I love that context that you created with Imperfectly Vegan. I just love it.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Well, you know, I put so much thought into it. And one of the things that can be a little tricky sometimes is that when I promote things, they're generally vegan, but the invitation would almost be to say like, okay, what makes you imperfectly vegan? You know, is it chocolate? Is it an egg? What is it? But I don't want to support that. But the deal is at the end of the day, you've got vegan in the term. So you are going towards vegan, and we're
Here
just
we go.
acknowledging that we're not perfect. We're human. Seems to be the theme of our show today, our humanness.
Here we go.
Okay.
You are listening to Sacred Exploration. To reach Lisa or her guest today, please call into 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to sacredexploration@gmail.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to Sacred Exploration. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Ota, and I'm speaking with Francesca Gentille as my guest. Before the break, we were talking about kind of the response, like if you lean forward and the other person leans forward, and sort of testing the waters and seeing, you know, if we're understanding each other, and how alcohol can really strip away your own sense of what's right and acceptable. And, you know, I alluded to the other night when I was in that difficult situation. And I did. I mean, when you said that, I totally backed away. I mean, I was leaning way over like, you know, dude, this is inappropriate. You're too close. And then it got to the point where I actually had to say, I need you to stop talking with me. I'm doing my thing, you know, or else I'm going to have to move over there. And basically it was just horrible. And the guy didn't let up at all. And it's because he had too much alcohol in him. It was very apparent. And so I think that is a big factor. And, you know, certainly when we spoke about the college kids, that's going to be a big factor. And so, you know, it's hard to get that message through to people. And of course, drinking is so insidious in our culture, and we don't want to make it wrong. Just like, you know, we want to be imperfectly vegan, and we don't want to be absolutist about anything. But, you know, a little alcohol does make us feel sexy and a little flirty, but a little bit too much can be simply that, just too much.
You know, I really empathize with the desire. It's hard to know that this now is that I started off shy. I can really empathize with the desire to feel bolder, or to feel a sense of support or freedom to step forward where we might normally hold back. And I'm really holding that very tenderly, trust me. And one of the things that I asked myself is, do I want to be the kind of person who's ashamed or regretful of what happened the next day?
Right.
Or do I want to be the kind of person that whatever I choose, I'm going to say I'm proud of that because I was conscious when I chose it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done things which I recommend. Take comedy improv, study at Toastmasters. You know, start to do things that get your voice to speak and get you to have situations where you're taking risks. Theater, you know, you can study amateur theater, things that start to build a muscle of being able to move through some of your fears while you're still sober, so that when you're at the bar, you can, or club or whatever, or frat night, or I don't know, meet up, you feel like you can move forward. You can also talk to people about what are some good questions to ask. I think questions like that about people's clothing, especially if they're wearing something very interesting, then it's like, that's so interesting. Does that have a story? Is really great. You can always ask, what had you most interested in being here tonight? Or, you try to find something that will start a real conversation. And
Right.
I think it's more successful at places that are quieter. So sometimes it's very hard at a bar. If you're a loud bar, if you don't have six-pack abs and broad shoulders, I recommend against, your hunting ground, or, you're not a 10, whatever a 10 is on whatever gender spectrum you want to go on. If, trying to have your hunting ground be a bar, because you just have to do it based on, that first look at you. And, whereas if you're in a place where you can be heard, you can actually be an interesting and interested person.
Right. The other thing too that kind of came through in this, and that I'm glad I'm remembering now, because I wanted to really bring this up in the show, is that, a lot of this is being pointed at men as maybe, not understanding consent, but women are responsible as well. We also have our own ability to respond. And so I think that's also in play right now, that women are having to check themselves about, are they giving false messages because maybe we want to be seen as sexy or beautiful or interesting or whatever it is. But maybe we're really not interested in anything more than that. But if we're sending signals that we are, that can be a problem. The whole Trump Stormy Daniels thing, there's one piece of it that bothers me, and it's the piece where, she asks him to pull down his pants so she could spank him with a magazine. And like, when I heard that, I'm thinking, that's flirting on a big order. I mean, that's like an invitation for something more. I mean, you don't ask someone to pull down their pants and then spank them. And it just seemed very bizarre to me. And I
wouldn't call that flirting, by the way.
I would not call that flirting at all. I would call that, so what I'm saying is it's beyond that. And it's I guess to afterwards say that you hadn't given consent. Again, it's not direct. So I guess it's a fine line. It's just a fine line.
No, there is no fine line. There is no fine line.
What is it?
The line is, did I consent or didn't I?
Right. So it's got to be that clear.
The line is not, I flirted with you. So let's say I just show my breasts right now. That's not saying that you get to touch them. That's not saying anything except for that I felt like doing that right now. Yeah, you might think they're lovely. Yeah, you might feel like a desire to touch them. But maybe I just felt like showing them. It's not, nothing is overt consent anymore. Hey, people, let's get this out of our brains. Nothing is overt consent. If I don't say, yes, please touch my breasts, you don't get to. They're mine. A woman wearing a short skirt, a woman wearing a low-cut top, a man walking around in a thong, none of that is an automatic. If a guy's walking around in a thong, it's not an automatic, I get to squeeze his butt.
Right. But it's just awkward, because when you think of Dylan, when these girls are just doing a strip show in front of him and he doesn't even ask for it.
Right. It's not okay. There is no assumption. Guess what? In the world we live in today, even outside of gender, there is no assumption that if somebody is dressed a certain way, if someone is a certain gender, if someone is doing something that we might think of as sexy, that automatically means that sex is on the table. There's a guy in my community who, in the Metoo movement, he wrote on Facebook and said, he's a guy who stands up for women and he would never do anything like that to women. And I actually wrote back and said, but you have. Because at parties that we've been at, you've gone past me and grabbed my butt without my permission. And his response was that in his defense, we had expressed attraction and we had flirted. And I said, oh, no. The fact that we had said, I find you attractive years ago, the fact that we had sometimes flirted does not give you any permission to do anything other than to talk to me unless I tell you not to talk to me. You know, it does not give any overt consent. No. And even I have a lot of friends that are sex workers. Just because you hire a sex worker isn't overt consent that you're going to get to do anything you want. They also have their own limits, their own boundaries. It's the beginning of a negotiation.
So at the end of the day, it's calling us all up for higher communication.
Much higher communication.
Much higher communication.
And by the way, it doesn't, just because we're in a relationship doesn't give me consent to your wallet, doesn't give me consent to your time. You know, all of these things need to be in negotiation.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the flirtation can come in.
we could make it a little more fun, yeah.
You know, right? Like very sensitive and gentle and intentional.
Yeah, and it can be fun. We can learn a lot from BDSM, by the way, because BDSM has a history of developing negotiation and then having a lot of fun.
Good point.
One of my mentors in the world of BDSM said that once he started to get into BDSM, he had more and better sex, not just because it was BDSM, but because he understood negotiation.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm aware of that, but I hadn't put that all together. But that's very interesting. I could see that.
Yeah, because it technically in BDSM, you say, "Hi, I'm attracted to you. I'm attracted to you too." Okay, great. So I'd like to create some sort of, you know, scene, some sort of engagement with you that we both enjoy. Oh, me too. Great. What do you like? Oh, I like spanking or biting or kissing or hugging or flogging or tickling or, you know, whatever. What do you like? Oh, I like flogging or hugging or wrestling or whatever. Oh, great. Is there anything that you wouldn't like? Oh, yeah, I don't like if someone puts their tongue in my ear. That just drives me nuts. Don't do it. Nuts in a bad way. Don't do it. How about you? What don't you like? Oh, I really have, you know, a sensitive nipples. Don't play with them. Okay, great. So tonight at 8:00 for about an hour. Okay, great. And then, oh, by the way, do you have a safe word? What's your safe word? Purple. What's your safe word? Cucumber. Okay, great. And now if anything's happening that either one of us don't like, we now know that we can say this and we'll stop the play. We might renegotiate and keep going forward, or we might just stop and say, for tonight, we're complete.
Right.
This is brilliant.
It is. There's a lot to be learned here for everyone. Right.
You know, what if we borrowed that, whether or not you consider yourselves, you know, kinky or not kinky, what if we just borrowed those principles and just put them into our regular sexuality, sensuality life? And let's take out the shame. I think a lot of the manipulation, a lot of the, you know, oh, I'm going to get you drunk so I can take advantage of you. I'm going to say that I want to be sexual so hopefully you'll love me. A lot of this kind of hidden manipulation around sexuality.
And hidden confidence. Like, do you really need the drink to feel confident and present yourself in an enticing way?
It's not confidence at all. It's fear and insecurity.
So,
is that, you know, a lot of this hides that we're insecure. It hides that we have shame around our sexuality, or that we have shame around wanting a relationship. Honeys, that is just going to blow the frick up later. If I'm insecure, that's going to blow the frick up later. If I'm hiding that what I really want is a relationship with you, that's going to blow the frick up later. If I'm hiding that I just really find you attractive, that's going to blow the frick up later. Confidence is super sexy, and real confidence is authenticity with grace.
Comes within.
So it's okay to actually say, I find you attractive.
So Francesca, we've only got 2 minutes left. Clearly you have much to offer. Do you want to share with our listeners how they can reach you on this topic or others?
Yeah, and if you're joining us late, and someone asked how to be safe in flirting and not cause fear, anger, or offense, please listen from the beginning. And how to reach me is relationshipdiva@gmail.com, relationshipdiva@gmail.com, or Francesca Gentille. You would just Google my name. My website's probably going to come up. and then email me there. And for our listeners, you get a complimentary hour phone session to really look at what's up in your life and get you some support. And thank you for our listeners for being, engaging in this juicy topic at a time when we're experiencing a paradigm shift in culture.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I mean, I just really feel that this is a sacred exploration, something very important to all of us. It's very primal to want to flirt, but clearly we need some new guidelines, and it's an opportunity to practice. And in that we can have a better experience, a more full experience. So with that, I thank you all for joining myself and Francesca Gentille today on Sacred Exploration. We'll be back next week on Voice America's Empowerment Channel. I'm your host, Lisa Tremont Ota. In the meantime, blessings as you go.
All clear.
And thank you, Facebook friends.